I agreed to be a surrogate for my sister. Then she pulled a cruel trick. I'll never forget the night everything changed. A night that started with tears and ended with a promise I thought was unbreakable. I'm 28F, and growing up, I always looked up to my older sister Hannah, 35F. She was everything I wasn't. Bold, confident, and always in control. Even as a little girl, I followed her every move, thinking if I could just be like her, life would be perfect. I never doubted her love or loyalty, not even for a second. Then came the years of heartache when Hannah and her husband, Ethan 40M, struggled with infertility. It wasn't just a medical battle, it was an emotional war. I remember the nights when Hannah would sit in the dim light of her bedroom, tears streaming down her face, whispering about how she felt like she'd lost a part of herself. She tried every treatment, every procedure, and every hope slowly faded away with each failed IVF attempt. I was powerless to take away her pain, and I desperately wanted to see her smile again. One chilly autumn evening, when the rain was tapping softly against our childhood window, Hannah called me over. I still remember the way she looked, her eyes red from crying, her voice trembling as she said, "I need you. You're my only hope." It wasn't a plea, it was a raw declaration of desperation. I didn't hesitate. In that moment, my world tilted on its axis. I agreed to be the surrogate for her and Ethan, convinced that I was simply doing what any loving sister would do. I thought I understood the gravity of what I was signing up for. We sat in a small, sterile doctor's office as we went through every detail of the surrogacy contract. The document was thick with legal jargon, outlining that as soon as the baby was born, all parental rights would be transferred to Hannah and Ethan. They promised to cover every single medical expense and assured me that I wouldn't be financially burdened. I was naive enough to believe that this was purely an act of love, a way to help my sister rebuild her shattered dreams of motherhood. In the beginning, the process felt almost like a shared adventure. I spent hours researching prenatal vitamins, reading every blog post about surrogacy, and even attending support groups. I wanted to be as prepared as possible, thinking that this was going to be an incredible journey for all of us. Hannah would call me every morning, her voice filled with hope and excitement, asking me if I'd seen the latest ultrasound images or if I remembered a particular baby name she had read about. I listened, nodding and smiling, feeling an unspoken connection that I assumed was unbreakable. There were moments when we laughed together too, like the time Hannah insisted on decorating my doctor's appointment room with fairy lights and little stuffed animals, claiming it would magically protect the baby. I couldn't help but smile at her over-the-top enthusiasm. I even joked with her about how I was going to have to grow a pregnancy glow just so she could see her future child's reflection in it. Those were the days I believed everything was going perfectly, that I was helping create something beautiful, something life-affirming. As the weeks turned into months, I began to notice subtle changes. At first, it was little things. Hannah texting me at odd hours with excited updates about the baby's progress, sending me photos of the tiny kicks I could feel, or the way her hands trembled with joy as she imagined holding her future child. I was touched by her enthusiasm and felt proud that I was playing a part in making her dreams come true. Every doctor's appointment, every checkup was an affirmation that I was doing something noble. I remember one particularly vivid afternoon when I was sitting in a sunlit room at the clinic, my hand resting over my slightly rounded belly, and a nurse came in with the news that everything was progressing well. The nurse smiled warmly and said, "You're doing great. The baby is growing wonderfully." In that moment, I felt a surge of emotion, not just happiness, but a profound connection to the life growing inside me. I imagined a future where my son would be the center of a happy family, where laughter filled the rooms of a home that once echoed with silence. Hannah was right there with me during these moments. She held my hand during the ultrasounds, her eyes wide with wonder as she peeked at the flickering screen, and her voice would break into excited whispers when the baby moved. We planned everything together, from the baby's name. Hannah's top 3 choices were always on the board, to the style of the nursery. She even took over the role of baby planner, ordering custom-made crib bedding and coordinating with interior designers to create what she promised would be a perfect space for our little miracle. In those early days, it truly felt like we were united by a shared purpose. I'd spend long evenings researching everything there was to know about pregnancy, and I'd call Hannah to share every small victory. The way I managed to sleep a little better, or the time I discovered a new craving that I could barely explain. Our conversations were filled with a mix of technical details and raw, unfiltered emotion. It was as if the baby was the glue that held our family together, promising to mend old wounds and create new memories. I trusted Hannah implicitly. I believed that this act of surrogacy was a testament to our bond, a sacrifice I was willing to make out of love. I had no inkling of the storm that was quietly brewing beneath the surface. I didn't see the subtle signs that, somewhere along the line, everything was about to unravel. The warmth in our conversations, the shared excitement, they were all part of a facade that would soon shatter in the most unexpected way. Looking back now, I realize how blind I was. I was so caught up in the emotion of the moment and the promise of creating a family for my sister that I never paused to question what was really going on behind those hopeful smiles. I was determined to be the selfless, loving sister who would do anything to help, not realizing that sometimes even the closest bonds can hide secrets and betrayals waiting to be exposed. I guess you could say that in the beginning, everything felt right. I was doing what I believed was the right thing, and in those moments of shared joy and hope, I felt like I was part of something larger than myself. But sometimes, the closer you get to the truth, the harder it is to let go of the illusions you once cherished. And as I sat there, feeling the tiny life within me, I had no idea that I was about to be pulled into a web of deception that would change everything I thought I knew about family, love, and trust. The first sign that something was wrong was so subtle, I almost didn't catch it. Hannah had always been on top of every detail. From the moment I agreed to be her surrogate, she was involved in everything, the appointments, the baby registry, even the way I was eating. If I craved something unhealthy, she'd send me a link to an article about the importance of balanced nutrition during pregnancy. If I felt too tired to talk, she'd text me long paragraphs about all the plans she was making for the baby's future. She was relentless in her excitement, almost obsessive, and while I sometimes wished for a little space, I took it as a sign of how much this baby meant to her. Then, suddenly she changed. At first, she stopped texting as often. The long messages filled with baby name ideas and nursery decorations became one-sentence replies. I brushed it off, thinking she was busy or maybe overwhelmed. Planning for a baby was a huge emotional and financial commitment, and I knew she had a lot on her plate. I gave her space, assuming she'd bounce back, but the distance only grew wider. Then she missed a doctor's appointment. Hannah had never missed a single one before. She had always been the one dragging me out the door, making sure I took every test, every ultrasound, every checkup seriously. But one afternoon, I sat in the waiting room alone, staring at my phone, waiting for an explanation that never came. I told myself not to panic. Maybe she was stuck in traffic. Maybe she had an emergency at work. But when I called her, she didn't answer. I sent her a text. No reply. By the time I left the clinic, a dark, gnawing feeling had settled in my stomach, an instinctive dread I couldn't shake. I told myself I was overthinking. One missed appointment wasn't the end of the world. People got busy. Plans changed. But then it happened again. And again. A week passed. Then 2. Then 3. Every time I tried to reach her, the silence grew louder. The warmth that had once filled our conversations was gone. No more baby name discussions. No more texts about nursery decorations. No more excited messages about the future. It was like she had vanished. Ethan wasn't much help either. Whenever I reached out to him, his responses were short and vague. He always had an excuse. Hannah was tired. Hannah was going through a rough time. Hannah just needed space. He assured me that everything was fine, but I didn't believe him. Something was wrong. By the time I was 6 months pregnant, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to Hannah's house unannounced, my heart pounding in my chest as I knocked on the door. The house, once filled with baby catalogs and paint swatches for the nursery, now looked cold and empty. When she finally opened the door, she looked different. Her face was blank, unreadable, like a mask that hid whatever she was feeling underneath. She didn't invite me in. She barely even looked at me. The sister who had once clung to me, sobbing about how this baby was her only chance at happiness, now acted like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. I asked her what was going on. She sighed, exasperated, as if she had been dreading this conversation. Then, with a calmness that chilled me to my core, she told me she didn't want the baby anymore. The words didn't make sense at first. I kept waiting for some kind of explanation that would make it all click into place. Maybe she was scared. Maybe she was overwhelmed. Maybe she was going through something I didn't know about. But she just shrugged and told me she had changed her mind. She wasn't ready to be a mother. She didn't feel the way she thought she would. She expected it to be different. I stood there, stunned, my mind scrambling to process what she was saying. I reminded her of all the times she had told me this was her dream, how she had begged me to do this for her, how she had cried in my arms about how much she wanted this child. I told her this wasn't a decision she could just take back, not after everything. She shrugged again and told me that wasn't her problem. I asked her what she expected me to do. She told me the baby was my responsibility now, and then she shut the door in my face. I don't remember walking back to my car. I don't remember driving home. I don't even remember how long I sat in the driveway, staring blankly at my steering wheel, feeling like the entire world had just tilted sideways. The baby wasn't mine. Not legally. Not emotionally. This was never supposed to be my child. I had signed every paper, gone through every medical exam, given up my body for months to give my sister the one thing she claimed she couldn't live without. And now, she was throwing it all away like it was nothing. I felt sick. Everything about my life had just been upended, and I had no idea what to do next. Ethan didn't answer my calls. My parents, who had been supportive of the surrogacy at first, had no idea how to react when I told them what happened. They kept saying it must be a misunderstanding, that maybe Hannah was just going through something, that I needed to give her time. But I knew better. I knew my sister. She had made her decision. And now, I had to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. I used to think of the legal system as something distant, something that only existed in TV dramas or horror stories about bitter divorces and drawn-out custody fights. I never imagined I'd find myself in the middle of it, fighting over a baby that by law wasn't even mine. But reality doesn't care about what you imagined. The morning of the court hearing, I sat in the stiff wooden bench outside the courtroom, my hands pressed against my belly as I tried to keep my nerves under control. 7 months pregnant and already exhausted, I was about to go into battle against my own sister and her husband. And I had no idea what they were planning to say. I knew what I was fighting for. I wanted legal custody of my baby. I had cared for him, and when Hannah and Ethan walked away, I was the only one left. But the law wasn't that simple. The contract I had signed before the pregnancy made it clear I had no parental rights. The baby was supposed to belong to Hannah and Ethan. But what happens when the legal parents abandon the child before he's even born? That was the question my lawyer was ready to argue. When Hannah and Ethan arrived, they looked calm. Too calm. Hannah sat with her arms crossed, her expression blank, while Ethan avoided looking in my direction. They hadn't responded to any of my messages in weeks, but now that we were in court, they were forced to acknowledge me. The judge started by asking Hannah if she still intended to claim parental rights once the baby was born. She answered without hesitation. No. Her voice was steady, emotionless. She explained that she had changed her mind, that she had realized she wasn't ready to be a mother, and that she had the right to make that decision. I already knew she was going to say this, but hearing it out loud still made my stomach turn. The judge turned to Ethan. He cleared his throat and shifted in his seat before confirming that he, too, wanted nothing to do with the child. He said that their circumstances had changed and that raising a baby no longer fit into their plans. He never looked up while speaking. My lawyer stood up and made it clear that if they were abandoning their parental rights, then the child needed a legal guardian. And since I was the biological mother, even if the contract had originally stated otherwise, I should be given full custody. But Hannah's lawyer interrupted. He argued that because I had signed the surrogacy agreement, I was not entitled to parental rights. That even if Hannah and Ethan were walking away, I wasn't the legal mother. If they didn't want the child, the proper procedure would be adoption or state intervention. I felt a cold sweat break out on my skin. If the judge ruled in their favor, my baby, my son, could end up in the system. I could see it in my lawyer's face. We needed more. We needed something that would prove that Hannah and Ethan weren't just backing out of the surrogacy, but that they had acted in bad faith. And that's when my lawyer brought out the evidence. Weeks before the hearing, I had spent hours digging through every email, every text message, every scrap of communication I had with Hannah and Ethan. And in doing so, I found something disturbing. Something I hadn't noticed before because I hadn't known to look for it. A deleted email thread. It wasn't from Hannah or Ethan directly. It was from an adoption agency, one I had never heard of. My lawyer had subpoenaed their records, and what we found was damning. Months ago, before Hannah had even told me she didn't want the baby, she and Ethan had been in talks with an adoption facilitator. The emails discussed potential matches for the child I was carrying, including financial arrangements for medical expenses and compensation for their time. Hannah and Ethan weren't just backing out. They had been planning to give the baby away to another couple for months, and they had never told me. My lawyer presented the evidence, reading from the emails. Hannah's face remained stone cold, but Ethan's expression cracked. He looked like he wanted to say something, but he stayed silent. The judge frowned and asked their lawyer for clarification. Their attorney scrambled for a response, saying that they had only explored adoption as an option and that there was nothing illegal about considering alternatives. But my lawyer pressed harder. If they had been planning to give up the baby, why hadn't they informed me? The person carrying him? Why had they waited until I was 6 months pregnant to tell me they didn't want him? Why was there mention of financial compensation in their discussions with the adoption agency? The room was tense. I looked at Hannah, waiting for her to say something. Anything. But she just sat there, staring straight ahead, refusing to meet my eyes. Ethan finally cracked. He shifted in his seat and muttered that they were just trying to find the best outcome for everyone. That it wasn't their fault if I got too attached to the baby. The judge didn't like that answer. In the end, the evidence of their deception changed everything. Because they had misrepresented their intentions, the surrogacy agreement was thrown into question. The judge ruled that since they had abandoned their parental rights and had been actively seeking to transfer custody without my knowledge, the contract was invalid. And just like that, I was granted custody. I walked out of that courtroom with a legal declaration that I was my son's mother. But more than that, I walked out knowing exactly who my sister was. She had used me, manipulated me, lied to me. I had given my body, my health, my entire life for months to give her something she claimed she wanted more than anything. And she had been willing to throw it all away for a secret adoption deal. As I sat in my car, my hands resting on my swollen belly, I whispered softly to my unborn son. He was mine now, and no one was going to take him from me. The moment I walked out of that courtroom, I knew my life would never be the same. I had won custody, but that victory came at a cost. My relationship with Hannah was beyond repair, and my family, well, that was a whole different battle waiting to happen. At first, there was silence. No phone calls, no angry messages, nothing. I thought maybe, just maybe, Hannah was ashamed. Maybe she'd take this as a wake-up call. Maybe she'd finally realize the damage she had caused and quietly slink away into the background of my life, letting me move forward without any more drama. I should have known better. 3 days after the court ruling, my parents called. I wasn't surprised. I had been waiting for it, dreading it. I didn't even check the caller ID. I just stared at my buzzing phone until the sound became unbearable and finally answered. My mother's voice came through, tight with barely contained anger. She asked me if I really had to ruin Hannah's life like that. I almost laughed. Ruin her life? She had spent months planning to discard my baby like an old piece of furniture, and somehow, I was the one who had gone too far. I kept my voice calm, but there was steel in it. I told my mother that Hannah had abandoned the baby, that she had lied to me, that she had been secretly arranging for someone else to take my child behind my back. My mother sighed, as if I was the one being difficult. She said Hannah had just been scared, that she didn't know what she wanted, that I should have given her more time to figure things out. I asked how much time she needed. Was 6 months of pregnancy not enough? She didn't have an answer. Then she dropped the real reason for the call. Hannah wanted to talk. She wanted to work things out. I nearly choked on the sheer audacity of it. Work things out? What was there to work out? She had walked away from her own child. She had ignored every message, missed every appointment, refused to even look at me in court. And now that she had lost, now that I had won, she wanted to talk? I told my mother no. Her voice sharpened. She said that, like it or not, Hannah was still my sister, and I needed to find a way to move forward. I told her that I had moved forward. Then I hung up. That phone call was just the beginning. I started getting messages from relatives, all of them pushing the same tired narrative. That Hannah had made a mistake, that she was going through a hard time, that I needed to forgive her. Forgive her? I was the one she had manipulated. I was the one who had been left carrying a child she never intended to keep. I was the one who had to fight in court just to make sure my baby had a home. And yet, somehow, I was the villain. It became clear that Hannah had spun her own version of events. She told people that I had tricked her into the surrogacy, that I had guilt-tripped her into taking on a responsibility she wasn't ready for. The worst part? Some people believed her. I lost friends over this. People who had once supported me, people who had congratulated me for helping my sister, now whispered behind my back. I even heard rumors that Hannah was telling people I had stolen the baby. Not that she had abandoned him. Not that she had planned to give him away. No. According to her, I had orchestrated everything from the start. It was infuriating, but I refused to let it break me. As much as Hannah tried to rewrite the past, the truth had a way of catching up with her. The court ruling wasn't just a slap in the face. It was a public humiliation. Everyone in our social circle knew what had happened. People who once admired her began keeping their distance. She lost friends. Ethan, who had sat silently through the entire ordeal, avoiding eye contact as if that would make him disappear, left her. It wasn't immediate, but a few months after the case ended, I heard through the grapevine that he had packed up and moved out. Some said he couldn't handle the shame. Others said he had never really wanted to be a part of Hannah's plan to begin with. Either way, he was gone. Hannah, who had once seemed so untouchable, so effortlessly in control, was now completely alone. Her carefully curated life, the one she had built on lies and manipulation, had crumbled around her. I like to say I felt sorry for her, but I didn't. Not after everything. Months passed. I gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby boy. The moment I held him in my arms, I knew, without a doubt, that I had made the right decision. He was mine. He had always been mine, even if I hadn't realized it at first. I moved on with my life, focusing on my son, my future. Then, one day, I got a message. It was from Hannah. It was short, almost hesitant. She wanted to see my son. She said she had made mistakes, that she regretted everything, that she just wanted to be a part of his life. I stared at the message for a long time, my chest tightening with a mixture of anger and disbelief. She had given him up before he was even born. She had turned her back on me, humiliated me, tried to take away my rights as his mother. And now, after everything, she wanted to play the role of the loving aunt? I didn't even hesitate. I sent her one final message. I told her that she had made her choice the moment she walked away. And that was a choice she would have to live with. Then I blocked her. For good. After everything that happened, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't stay. This town, my so-called family, the constant whispers behind my back. I wanted nothing to do with any of it. I refused to raise my son in a place where people thought Hannah was the victim and I was the villain. So I left. I packed up everything I owned, sold what I didn't need, and moved to a new city. A fresh start. People love to say that family is forever. That blood is thicker than water. But that's a lie. Family isn't about DNA. It's about the people who stand by you, who fight for you, who love you without conditions. Hannah was none of those things, and I had spent too long believing that just because we shared a childhood, I owed her something. I didn't. A mother who would never, ever treat him like a mistake. And as I watched him sleep peacefully in my arms, I knew I had finally done the right thing.